Thanks for staying with us on The Real Story. We just heard from Senate Republican leader Kevin Kelly on crime and GOP calls for action in tackling preventing it in our state. Now we want to bring in the Chief Deputy Majority Leader, State Senator Gary Winfield, who is also co-chair of the Judiciary Committee. He was the main sponsor of the Police Accountability Bill that was passed 2 summers ago. He has a very different take from Republicans, and he joins us this morning to talk with us. Good morning, Senator Winfield.
Good morning.
All right, so your reaction to the Republican plan. I had read that you kind of felt like they were drumming up fear about the reality of crime in our state and where it stands right now.
I think more accurately what I was saying was that the way that this has been approached drums up fear. I don't know that it's their intention to do that. Others can opine about that. But I think that the way the conversation began was we have this crisis going on and there wasn't a lot of information going out. What you saw was that subsequent to stating that we had a crisis, there was an endeavor to find out what was really happening. I think in positions like ours, we have a responsibility to meet the public with information and to make sure that the things that we're saying are correct and that the public can depend on the things that we're putting forward.
Okay, so you're saying that you don't think their intention was that to drum up fear, but that some of their actions, the way they presented things, might have increased alarm without necessarily looking directly at the data, is what you had said. Is that accurate to say?
Pretty much. I try not to get into the intention. That's a rabbit hole many of us need to go down. Whether that's their intention or not, what has happened is people are afraid. I've even heard the notion, and I think it's been reported in the press, that some people think they may be shot in their kitchens because of what's happening. And we need to take the temperature down and really think about what is actually happening in Connecticut, and also given the moment that we're in, what's happening nationally, and whether or not what's happening in Connecticut is owed to what's actually happening within the boundaries of the state or what's happening as a whole to this country.
Sure. So what do you think? Where does Connecticut stand? Are there reforms that need to be made? I know that Democrats kind of said that we don't need to do a special session about this right now. We can wait until the regular session to talk about it. What's your take?
Well, I would kind of try to correct the record here. I think we are currently having a conversation that's been going on for a long time. Some of your viewers will know that there's a outfit called the JJPOC, which includes legislators, the Education Department, DCF, DOC, everybody that touches the juvenile justice system. It's been in place for a long time. This conversation has been going on. It's where most of our juvenile justice policy comes from. And it's a place where you actually bring the policy suggestions, you think about it, you hammer out what the consequences of changing policy are, and we make better policy decisions. I think that in this moment, we need to be very thoughtful about what we do. Several years back, this country responded to what looked like a crime wave, and juveniles, particularly juveniles of color, who the country thought were, in some people's terms, wilding or doing other things. And what grew out of that was not something I think we ever want to return to. I think we have to have a thoughtful approach to what we're doing and make sure that the solutions don't just look like they deal with the problem, but actually deal with the problem.
So do you think that's something next legislative session that you all will explore at some point? Like, is there any reforms that you're looking in this Republican plan that you say, that might be a good idea? I mean, even from the funding of community programs.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not going to pull their suggestion into its component pieces. I don't think that's how they put it forward, and I don't think that's how to treat it. But on that individual thing, I think if you would listen to the conversation on criminal justice in the state of Connecticut in the last decade plus, I've been a part of it, and I've been talking about those kind of things for a long time. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I'm going to say it's so interesting because you're saying that some of these problems have been around before, that this is an ongoing discussion that people have looked at, and it's not necessarily something that's all of a sudden happening. Is that accurate?
All of the problems that we're talking about in one form or another have been here before. They've been in different communities. And at that point, people weren't as excited about dealing with the issues. But if we're going to have a conversation about this, we need to have a conversation that is informed about why this crime happens. Crime is the symptom of a problem. Crime is not the problem itself. It's a problem when it visits you or I in our lives, but crime is a symptom of a larger problem.
Sure, and you're talking about kind of the I think it was the rise in motor thefts in like the suburbs, where you've had motor thefts in our cities for years and years and years. That's what you're kind of referring to, right? And
right.
There hasn't been calls for change before.
Yes, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. And other crimes, and during the time that was happening, there were many of us who were talking about those issues and talking about bringing resources to bear, and being opposed by some of the same people who are now saying we need to bring resources to bear. That being said, what is important is to figure out if we're going to make people safer, then we're going to do something to actually attack the source of crime. And the source of crime is varied, particularly in communities that we've been talking about for a long time. And we're not even having conversations about the things that generate that. Inequity, trauma that's complex, not the type of trauma we normally talk about, and many, many other things that are not even part of anyone's proposal currently.
Yeah, let's talk about, I know that police departments, several police departments that, we've spoken with are talking about the juvenile car thefts. And there have been police departments that have said that they feel like the juveniles don't necessarily feel like there's any kind of consequence. I mean, we've heard of some of the cases of, the New Britain police had arrested someone, let me pull this up so I say it right, a juvenile driving a stolen car who killed a jogger in a hit and run that we had covered on June 29th. That juvenile had been arrested 13 times in the past 3.5 years. So do you think that points to pieces of a problem? Just because some of our police departments have continually said that's a concern that they have.
There's a lot that happens after an arrest that determines whether someone finds himself deeper in the system or not. I know that part of the proposal before us is to try to get our young people in deeper into the adult system. If the young person belongs in the adult system, there are mechanisms for that under the system we currently have. Some of them are automatic and some of them are more discretionary. But I think that the professionals in the system, in the prosecutor line and in the line of judges should have some discretion to make sure that they're responding to the case before them.
Right. So it's for you, you're looking at it and you're talking about prevention. And you're talking about the poverty and what the root cause is of why people are committing these crimes. How much do you think COVID has to do with some of what we're seeing? I know you said it was there before, but how has that exacerbated some of the problems, do you think?
Well, I think anyone who's looking at data would suggest to you that COVID has had something to do with it. We see an increase in crime across the country during COVID. People's feeling of security has reduced. Their actual economic security has reduced. Those things are factors. The level of trauma that people who already have trauma has increased, and we should be thinking about it. We should be making sure, again, that the policy that we put in place is responsive to the issue. And let's also be clear, because there's this constant conversation about juvenile car thefts. The reality is that most of the car thefts we're talking about are adults. We have laws on the books that deal with adults, and there are states who have laws on the books that deal with adults in much, much more harsh ways than Connecticut, and they still saw an increase in crime. And so just saying to the public, well, if I pass this law, I'm going to reduce crime, is just not accurate.
Where do you think the conversation needs to be in our state right now when it involves crime? Where do you want people to focus?
I think that people rightly and individualized focus on what happened to them. Any crime that happens to an individual is a very real thing, and it means everything to that individual. I think we need to be looking at what is really happening in the state. Has crime shifted where it's happening, and why would that be, and deal with that? What are the sources of people acting in the way that they're acting, and how does the state respond to that? Do we actually put resources in those places? Do we think about trauma in different ways so that we don't just say, well, we're going to have trauma-informed care, but trauma-informed care that responds? There's community-level trauma that we don't talk about. So there's a lot of conversation happening, and I think it properly happens in the form of the JJPOC, where you have the experts who deal with each component part come to the table and work together.
I was asking Senator Kelly about the pieces of the, it's not legislation, sorry, pieces of the plan that we're talking about, the changes to the police accountability bill. One of those revised qualified immunity law, revising that law. I know the governor had said when we had asked him about it, that was a no-go for him. But Senator Kelly brought up, I said, why was that important to you? Why did you put that in there? And he had said that finding and recruiting police officers right now has been incredibly difficult. So give us your take.
I think the police accountability bill was responsive to the call of the people of the state of Connecticut. Over the summer last year, we saw people in places that never talk about these issues come out and say something has to be done about what's happening. Connecticut, fortunately, had already been in a conversation about this, but I think the bill was responsive to the call of the people of the state of Connecticut. Having said that, this conversation was supposed to be about, initially at least, juvenile car thefts, and all of the things that are in the proposal that deal with police accountability aren't touching on that. If there's a problem dealing with recruiting people into the police force, we should figure out why that is, because the police accountability bill and what it did for immunity suggests that if you do something that is willful, wanton, and that kind of thing, you would have a problem. I would submit that almost all of the police in the state of Connecticut aren't doing that, and so it shouldn't be an issue for them.
Interesting. Okay. All right, Senator, we are going to close this out. Just tell me, when you're looking to the next session, and especially as co-chair of the Judiciary Committee, where do you see priorities in our state? Where are you seeing the need for legislation and effort from lawmakers for next session?
Well, I think there's a conversation going on about some things. As you may know, we did a change to a form that allows for more information for police and judges. I think there's a conversation about what things we may need to do and whether they can be done through legislation or other means. And after that conversation is over, we'll know what the legislation is. I don't think we are at the point where we can say what that legislation will be, but surely, given the temperature and tenor of this conversation, you, myself, and everyone involved will know what it is.
Sure. State Senator Gary Winfield, always good to have you on The Real Story. Thanks for coming on and explaining your position and what you think we need to be looking at and focusing on. Always appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Have a good morning. All right, that does it for us on The Real Story. If you want to watch these segments again, head to fox61.com or download the Fox 61 app and watch The Real Story every Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on Fox 61. Have a great morning.